Hi, it's Kris from my girlfriend's quilt shop, and we are working together on Quilting Through the Seasons, the brand new ladder quilt from Kimberbell Designs. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about multi-hooping. Now, this is especially important for those of you with smaller size hoops, which is perfectly okay. Thanks to Kimberbell, they have made it possible for us to be able to do all of these fun designs, even in a 5x7 hoop size. Now, there are a few things that we need to think about that are done a little differently than what is outlined in the book and what we might normally be used to. But don't worry, I'm going to take you step by step on how this is done. Now you can see here that I've already done one of those larger hooping sizes. And yes, this was done in 2 small hoopings on the 5x7 hoop. For those of you with larger hoops, you can do it all in one hooping, and you don't have to worry about all of the following steps that I'm going to be outlining in the video. However, you still may be interested in watching throughout the video to see if there are any tips or tricks that you can pick up along the way. This wreath is ready to go with the background quilting behind it and the wreath beautifully stitched out. My leaves are in place and even my Velcro is in place in order to be able to switch out the different seasonal embellishments. Super fun. Now in today's video, I'm going to walk you step by step on how to do the vase. Let's pull out our books and take a look together at page 32. You will notice right up here at the very beginning that it says the 5x7 hooping instructions are found on a separate PDF file. Instructions below are for an 8x12 hoop. So for those of you with larger hoop sizes, you can go ahead and continue going throughout this process, just as outlined in the book. Now, there is one little caveat here. Sometimes when it will say the instructions are for an 8x12 hoop, that would be for those of you who are not doing background quilting. Sometimes when the background quilting comes into play is that we actually have to take another look and go, can I really do it in 8x12 hoop, or do I need to bump it up one more and go to a 9x14 hoop? That will vary depending on the design, but always pay close attention that just because it has it here, take a look one more time at what it is on the block by block quilting right here. It is an 8x12 design. However, you may have to do it in a 9.5x14 hoop size. The reason I know that is because it tells us the exact dimensions here, which says 8.50 by 12 by 0.50. The 8.5 is actually not going to work in the 8x12 hoop. So just know that if you're doing block by block quilting, you will need to bump it up to a 9.5x14 inch hoop. If you don't have that large of a hoop size, then you definitely want to go with the 5x7 hooping instructions. And again, we find that it's found on a separate PDF file. That means you will not find it in this book. However, because Kimberbell has included all of the designs for us on the CD, that CD is where you're going to find the instructions for the 5x7 hooping. All right, so with that being said, what I've done is I printed out my separate instructions for the 5x7 hooping. I know that this is exactly the one I want because it's noted here that the 8x12 hooping instructions can be found in the main quilt instructions. That's the book I just showed, but instructions below are for a 5x7 hoop. From here, we have our background fabric, which is the gray dot, and we're also going to need some embroidery felt, and that's these 2 pieces that you see right here for the leaves. We'll be using some wash away topping along with those leaves, along with our hook and loop fastener tape, which will be used, and a little bit of fabric glue. This is part A. Part B is where we'll be adding the vase, and we'll need some thumbtacks in order to do so. And it's the flat thumbtacks that you want to use in this hooping technique. The first thing we've done is we've ironed fusible backing to the wrong side of the background and the vase fabrics. Now here has the clear blue tile quilting instructions. And the following only applies if using clear blue tile quilting designs that are sold at kimberbell.com. If you are not using this method, then you will go to Part A hooping, which is right up here. However, because we are using clear blue tiles, this is what I want to look for. I want to find on my CD KDQ 291 Floral 8. And it says to follow the clear blue tiles method to quilt the entire background before adding the applique embroidery. What we need to do first, before we even get into the embroidery instructions, is we need to quilt our background. And because I'm using a 5x7 hoop to do so, that means I can use smaller quilting tiles. For this one, I'm going to use a combination of both a 4x6 tile as well as the 4x4 tile. The reason why I know that is because if I place this up here, and if I were to do this again over and over, take a look. You've got a lot of extra space here that's not needed. So what I'm going to do is instead, I'll place this up here and take a look. My 4x4 fits right in there. Don't worry too much about getting to the edges because, as we know, that will be cut off and removed later. So as long as you're about centered, you'll be just fine here. So in order to do this, I have my little tile here, and I'm going to make a little dot in the middle and draw my crosshairs right here. I also have a little window here that says what size. Because I'm using two different size tiles, I am going to make myself a little note as to which size in particular I'm using, just so that I avoid confusion when I get over to the machine. So I'm just going to put 4x6 right here. Now, because that has been marked, I can place this one right below it, just lining these markings up here. And again, I'm just doing some quick little markings there. And this is a 4x4. In fact, I'm just going to put a 4 in there because it's either a 6 or a 4, right? Now, I need to go over another segment, another hooping. How do I know where to place that? Well, I've got these little markings right here on my tile. The previous tile is always going to show me where my next tile fits. I'll do the same thing on this side, on my 4x4. I am using the Kimberbell blue marker that actually comes with your designs, and it will wash away. All right, so you can see here that I have those. Now I know exactly where to place my next tile, lining up against the edge of my previous markings. Go ahead and mark my crosshairs and my center, and I'm going to put the number 6 in here to remind me that when I go to my machine, I'm going to pull up the 4x6 inch design file. I'll do the same thing here. Pick this up, place it against my previous markings, and it's butted up right against the top tile. And I'm putting a number 4 there so I remember it's the 4x4 design. And just continue repeating this method until you get all the way across your background. Now the next step would be to go over one more. And I certainly could use this size if I wanted to. It would just go off of the background fabric, which would be fine. But the nice thing is that Kimberbell has additional sizes in here, and take a look at that. When I place the 2 inch by 6 inch, I'm perfectly good to go. So with that being done, I'll line that up right here and right there, and I can do my crosshairs with a 2x6. And this time I am going to write 2x6. I want to make sure that I pull up the right design file when it comes time to stitching this out. So this is a 2x6, and I'm going to now do a 2x4. So it's really fun because it's almost like putting together a puzzle to see how we can get all the way across. This is 2x4. Remember, it's also like a stamp. I like to say that because wherever this clear blue tile goes, right underneath is where the background quilting goes. And the beautiful thing about this whole system is that you have no idea where you started and where you ended with a file. It all goes seamlessly into one another. So on my USB stick, I need to make sure and pull up 4 different files. I want to make sure that I have the 4x6 file, the 4x4 file, the 2x6 file, and the 2x4 file. Again, if you want to just eliminate the 2-inch ones, you could certainly go all the way across this way. It wouldn't matter too much, other than you may need a little bit more of batting in order to fit into your hoop. Okay, so all of my files have been put on here. My whole background has been marked. This looks a little scary. I promise it's the easiest thing you'll ever do. Now that this is on here, I have a little bit of extra batting. I do want to tape this in place just so that my edges don't get caught with the presser foot. So I'm just going to use a little bit of Kimberbell paper tape along the edges. And it's okay if it gets caught in the stitching. The stitching will just go right over top of it. It won't harm anything. And the nice thing is that this will all be enclosed in the seam allowance as well as it's going to be cut off if there's any left. Now that the background has been taped into place, I'm ready to hoop. And I'm going to use my 5x7 hoop to do this. What I'd like you to remember is to loosen the screw on the bottom hoop. And that's going to help you in order to get this little quilt sandwich in here a little bit better. And I'm going to do my very best to try and center this crosshair the best I can, seeing where my centering crosshairs are. And I've got plenty of hoop to be able to have some wiggle room here because the design is much smaller than the hoop size. You can see here why it's important that you loosen that screw. I'm a little wonky here, so I'm going to just rehoop, reposition it a little bit. I could also do some angles on the embroidery machine, but I like to get it as close as I can. There we go. That looks much better. And I'm going to just tighten that little screw up. Okay, so my goal here is to get my needle directly over the center of the crosshair. And I am using the 4x6 design file. So you can see here that I already have the 4x6 pulled up, but I do need to move my needle position because the needle is not directly over the center crosshair. So this is where I'm going to use my little arrow keys. And I'm also going to use my little guide beam here, just again to help me visualize where this is going. Bingo, right there. Okay, so can you see here that my needle is directly over the center crosshair? I'm also, again, using the 4x6 design. I have a little bit of a light taupe as the thread color. And now I'm going to put my foot down and begin stitching. So you can see here that my first hooping has already stitched out and it's time to move to the second one. So what I'm going to do is just loosen my screw. Okay, a little bit there. And I'm going to keep the bottom hoop intact. And all I'm going to do is just remove the top hoop and shift this over. And I'm going to take the little W on my machine just to give me a guide beam. And you can see the little red dot right here. And this is really going to help me as I try and center this over here. And it may shift off just a little bit, but that's okay because that's where I'm going to use my cursor keys on my machine. And I'm just simply going to just move my needle over just a few places. There we go. Pull down. Perfect. So it's right there centered. Again, I'm using the 4x6 design file. I can continue doing that throughout, so let's see, one more hooping. So there's 3 hoopings of that. And I'll put my foot down and begin again. And like I said before, the amazing thing is that once this is all done together, you won't even be able to tell the difference between where it stops and where it ends. I've now finished 3 complete hoopings, and it's time to shift over one more. But do you remember that last one was the little one? It was the 2" by 6". So I need to make sure and pull up the correct design file on my machine. Let's take a look at the screen in front of us. And I'm finished with this design, so I'll go ahead and hit return. Whoops, I'm going to actually go home. There we go. Hit embroidery and pull up my design USB stick. Okay. So as I take a look at my design files, this is the one I'm looking for. It says Clear Blue Tiles KDQ 291 2x6. That's the one I'm going to press on and hit set and embroidery. I'll go ahead just like before. I'm going to loosen this screw up a little bit. Pull up my top hoop and just shift this over a little bit. I think I'm going to be okay to get in here without having to add more fabric. But we'll see. Let's see what happens here. I may have needed to add a little bit more just for the hoop to hold on to. I'm going to use my little W here, which gives me the light, and hit layout and move. This is going to bring up my little cursors. Oh, that's a little bit too low. Let's see how far I can go over. Okay, I'm fine with that. So I don't need to add more to the side for the hoop to hold on to. However, I am a little bit below, so no big deal. All I have to do is just pop the hoop up, and I'm just going to shift this down a little bit in the hoop, replace my hoop once again, and there we go. I'm right on the money there. Make sure and tighten my hoop before I begin stitching. All right, so you can see here that my 2x6 design is the one I want to use. My needle is directly over the center crosshair. Now I'm ready to go. My 2x6 design file is now complete. Now I'm ready to lift up the top, and I'm going to do that second half of the background. Remember, the first one I'm going to do is the 4x4 design file. So I'm going to hit OK and home. It's okay to cancel it, go back to embroidery, and pull up my USB stick. Now you can see here those background quilting files. Make sure you choose the correct one. And on this one, it's the 4x4 design. And hit set. And embroidery. Once again, I will loosen my screw, lift up my top hoop, find my little guide beam here to help me, and bring this down. Now let's take a look at something. This is important. You can see here that this is not completely in the hoop, is it? Because I'm using a 5x7 hoop. So there's a couple of things I can do. One, I could take a chance, right? And because there's such light stitching, I might be able to get away with simply placing that hoop back in and letting there be nothing right there. But I like to play it a little bit safer than that, actually. And what I'm going to do is, because this is the 4x4, I'm going to switch out for my 4x4 hoop. However, one more thing to note is this. I could add another piece of fabric, just kind of overlap it. Again, just right here. It's not going to be stitched on, so it would be fine. But again, it would just be one more measure to hold this background in place. I could use a little bit of paper tape. I could sew it, with a basting stitch, whatever I might do to just hold that in place. So there's a few different options here. I think I'm going to go ahead and go with the option of simply changing out my hoop size to the 4x4 hoop. So here I'm at the machine and I'm just barely switched out my hoop. I'm going to go ahead and put that right there. And I'm with a 4x4 now design. Let's go ahead and bring that quilt sandwich into there. See, I have a much better chance of fitting this in here when I use this size. Bring this down and over. This doesn't want to go in very easily, so what that tells me is I want to unscrew this a little bit more. Just loosen up that hoop size. Okay, let's see if this will do. Tighten that up. And going to go to Layout, Move, and bring this down. Okay, so that looks good. And put my presser foot down and begin. We are almost finished with the background quilting. As you can see, there's quite a few steps here, but the results are worth it. My final hooping is going to be for the 2x4 design. So what I need to do is, again, pull it up, go out of what I just was in, pull up the new design, and make sure that I center over the crosshairs once more. And then I'll be finished with the background quilting. Now, before I begin with the next step of the process, I'm going to do a couple of things. And the first thing is that I'm going to just trim up this background block so that there is no longer the batting around it. That's just excess that is going to get in the way. So just go ahead and do that real quick. And then what I want to do is I need to remove the blue markings that I previously put on there. And there's actually a really simple way of doing so, and that is with water. But what I have found to be successful at is actually using my misting spray bottle and shooting it with water that way. I have found that to be really the most simple, straightforward way of getting rid of these markings. You can see that they virtually disappear in front of me. And if a little comes back, just spray it again. But just having a little bit of water pressure on there has really seemed to help. You want to make sure to not take this to your ironing board until all the markings have been removed. Pressing it with heat may actually cause the markings to stay, which we don't want that, right? So you can see here that it's pretty straightforward, very easy to do. And just like that, my markings have disappeared. Hooray! Look how beautiful that quilting design is. Isn't it gorgeous? Wow, I can see this on a lot of different projects. So I'll go ahead and allow that to dry and take it to the iron and just kind of press out any wrinkles that might be left in there. And then I'm ready to move on to the embroidery applique of this block. So if you're following along with me with the instructions for the 5x7 files, I want you to take a look at page 1. What we've just completed is KDQ Floral 8, where we have quilted the entire background before beginning. And now I'm ready to take this to the next step. And in order to do that, it tells me to load the part A embroidery file into the machine, which I'm going to do so in just a moment. And I'm going to stitch the background placement line and tick marks. But before I do that, what I want to do is I need to take this background fabric. I'm going to fold it in half lengthwise with right sides together to create the center fold. Then I will fold over the edge over 2 inches towards the center fold. And this is what's going to help me to know exactly where to place it according to the tick marks found on the 5x7 design file. First off, fold it in half, right sides together. And I could probably just get away with a little finger press, I think, right here. Let's see. I'm going to really take a close look and do exactly as is outlined here. So my center fold is right there. And then I need to fold this side over towards the center by about 2 inches. So once again, I'll take my ruler here to help me do that. Just finagle that over a little bit. And once again, do a finger press. If you want to, you could certainly take it to an iron as well. The first file that I want to pull up on my machine is KD815 5x7 vase. And this is going to be the first part of this design. And I'll hit set and embroidery. You can see that the first step that's going to happen is the placement line with the little tick mark. And that's going to help me line up my background fabric to where it needs to be. So I've used a black thread just so that we can see it a little bit better, but it doesn't matter which thread color you use. With my placement line and my tick mark here, I'm able to align this perfectly. Right here is where I'm going to place the center fold, the first one that I did. And I'm lining up the left fold to the placement line. Tick mark down here along the bottom. Left line is where the left fold goes. Now I can open it up and open it up again this way. And I'm going to tape this into place. Now don't worry if it's not taped in perfectly, because it will now do a basting stitch again to hold this back in place. Okay, we're ready to begin all of the thread color changes, right? We've got greens, different variations. We have some creams, and this is going to be a little bit longer stitch out. So just follow again step by step on when those thread colors change, and that's really going to give some depth to that foliage in the vase. Very, very beautiful. So let's go ahead and begin switching out thread colors and putting on some good music, if you will. Now that we have done the filled stitches on many of these leaves, it's now time to add the felt leaves. And in order to do that, what's going to happen is that the machine is going to stitch out a series of placement lines. Let's take a look. With those lines having been stitched out, I now know exactly where to place my green felt. Now this is the smaller of the 2 pieces of felt that we cut earlier. As you can see here, it has stitched a really dark solid line down the center, and that is staying put. The outside edges are actually basting stitches and are meant to be cut away. But the first thing we're going to do is just take our scissors and we just trim right up against those lines, all the way around the leaves. Now, if removing these stitches seems a little frustrating to you, remember, if you wanted to keep them, you certainly could. Just being able to remove these stitches just adds a little bit more of a 3-dimensional element to our block. But again, if it's causing you frustration to remove them, there's no harm in just keeping them as it is. So I've gotten to this point where I have removed the basting stitches off of one, and I do love the look of that. That's really fun. But I think what I'm going to do is, rather than take the time to remove all of those right now, I think it will be personally a little bit easier just to remove those after the whole project is outside of the hoop. And then I can actually maneuver my fabric a little bit more. So again, it's up to you, but I think for me, what I'm going to do is just go ahead and keep them the way they are now, and then remove those stitches afterwards. So the next step is it helps us take some of this water-soluble topping of Timberbells, and we're just going to place it over top of what we just stitched out. And just tape it into place. And the reason for this is because we don't want the presser foot to get caught on this as we're doing the other side. Okay, so I'm just taping it in a few places. And now I'm going to take it back to the machine, and it's going to do the placement outlines for the remaining leaves that we're going to do the same step as we did prior. And we'll do the same thing on this side with the felt. And again, we're just trimming up the outside edges along those basting stitches. And once these are all trimmed, we can then remove the basting stitches so that we have a three-dimensional leaf that pops up. But I'm going to wait on doing that until after the block is complete. And then that way, it just, I think, will be a little bit easier once it's outside of the hoop. But for now, let's make sure and go ahead and just trim right outside. You're going to notice there's going to be some areas that will actually just kind of pop up on its own, like you just saw, and that's because the basting stitches were cut. So whatever's easiest for you, you could try and trim into them right now and cut that way, or you could remove them later. But again, make sure that your thread color is one that you want to have on these green leaves. Again, just because that is going to be shown, it is a raw edge applique. I'm going to take a piece of the water-soluble topping and do the same thing that we did earlier by covering that up. And again, the reason for this is because the presser foot needs to ride over it without getting caught onto these leaves. The next stitch that's going to happen is the stitch placement lines for our Velcro pieces. I'm going to change out the green for a white because I want the white to just match right into the background of the Velcro. There are 3 circles that just stitched out, and these are the placement outlines for where to place my Velcro. What I'm going to do is just take a little glue stick and just bring it over top of each one of those areas. Okay. And then I'll just push on the Velcro, and I am using the hook side of the Velcro. And now I'll put it back into the machine, and it's going to do kind of like a little starburst design on each one just to hold it into place. It's time to stitch out the registration marks so I know how to line up my next hooping. And so to do that, I want to make sure and use a thread color that is going to definitely show. And so I'm just switching it out for black so that I can see those registration marks better. Okay, so we're finished with our first hooping. How's it going so far? This was a bit time consuming on this one, that's for sure. But the results are amazing, aren't they? So what I'm going to do is I'm just removing all of the tape, and I'm also going to remove the excess stabilizer. just simply tearing it away. And again, I'm going to finish completing the cutouts of these leaves after it's entirely finished. But for right now, I'm okay to just remove it from the hoop. And you want to also just trim up your stabilizer just right up to the fabric. And I have my placement lines right here. Another thing I could do right now if I wanted to, but I can also wait till the very end, is I could take my seam ripper and undo the basting stitches of this just to get that out of the way. But instead, I think I'm going to go ahead and just move on to the second hooping. And in order to do that, I just need to take my 5x7 hoop and once again, just place my stabilizer inside. I'm now ready to move on to the second hooping. So I want to get out of this design, hit embroidery, find my USB stick, and let's find the second half of this design, part B. And that is right here, my friends, Katie 815 5x7 vase. I'll hit set and embroidery. The first thing it's going to do is stitch out the registration marks for lining up the first hooping to the second. Do you remember the two thumbtacks that we had out earlier? This is where they come into play. What I'm going to do is simply turn over my hoop and place one thumbtack in the corner where those two lines meet. Just place it like that, and I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. Right there. With those two in the corners, now I'm going to take a little piece of paper tape and just secure it over top just to hold into place temporarily. And flip this back over to the front. So with my hoop right side up, the little thumbtacks are pointing up. Now I'm going to take my background fabric, and I actually have this turned upside down. I also have my hoop upside down. For me, this is a little bit easier to see where I'm going. And the goal here is that I'm trying to get the point of the thumbtack right at the corner here and here of the registration marks. So if I flip it over, I can see those two corners right there, and very carefully place that over top. And sometimes you just have to do a little adjusting and you can feel it. There we go. The one thumbtack is now in place. Now it's time to do the other side. And that one is also now in place. Perfect. Okay, so with that being done, I'm going to take some tape and just hold this block into place in just a couple of areas. Don't worry, it's going to be having a basting stitch here in a minute just to make sure that everything is lined up and ready to go. But I do like to have a little tape there just to make sure it stays put while I put it in the machine, because I do need to remove the tacks now. I don't want the tacks inside here while I'm stitching out. There we go. Okay. And if you need to, another tip is to take a piece of tape, roll it, and you can actually put a little bit underneath as well. Again, just to hold it into place, making sure that the tape is out of the way of the stitching. Okay, so with that being said, now this is really important because you're going to notice that with this block, the vase is actually a little offset from where the foliage comes out. So it's okay that it looks like it's off a little bit, off-centered. That's exactly what you want it to be. I've situated my hoop to be the correct way now, and I'm going to slide it into the machine, and let's watch it do the tack down. Now it's going to stitch the placement line for my vase. And place my vase fabric over top. Our vase is complete, and now there's some very special trimming instructions that are a little bit different than what we usually do. So let's take a look at page 4. It says to trim the block to 8.5 by 12.5 as follows. But we don't have an 8.5 by 12.5 inch orange pop ruler, and we don't have any real trim lines because we don't have block by block quilting. We did an overall edge to edge. So this time it is going to be really important to be able to make sure that we're doing it according to these instructions. So you place an 8.5 by 10.5 orange pop ruler over the block and align the design with the vase 3/8 inch above the outer bottom edge of the ruler and 3 inches from the inner left edge of the ruler. So let's take a look at what are they talking about. Just go ahead and remove that. We can trim up that stabilizer as well. I'm going to go ahead and take my 8.5 by 10.5 inch orange pop ruler and place it approximately around here along the bottom edge. In fact, we may be okay to line it up right here. Let me see if that works. And also remember, we need to be 3 inches from over here. So I'm going to just bring this over and do a little measuring just to double check. Nope, I'm 2 inches here, so it means I need to go out a little bit further. Okay, so 3 inches from the side. There you go, 3 inches. See here, 1, 2, 3, from the left side of my orange pop ruler over here. And then I need to be 3/8 of an inch close to here. So let's see where we're at when we do that. Check here. 1, 2, 3. Yep, 3/8. So it looks like, just so everyone knows, looks like we're going to be just fine to be able to use this bottom horizontal line as a guide. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. But again, just to double check and make sure you're looking at the bottom of your vase and you're counting on your ruler 3 lines. 1, 2, 3. That represents 3/8. So I'm good there. And I'm just, again, going to do a double check real quick, make sure I'm 3 inches. I may have moved it just a titch, so I'm going to bring it over a little bit. There we go. And there we go, 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Okay. So with that being aligned, what I'm going to do is just use my rotary cutter, and I'm going to just trim on the left side and on the right side. That is all I am trimming right now. So please be very, very careful as you do this. And let me share one more tip. If this is a little too scary for you to be able to hold this and use a rotary cutter at the same time, another idea I have for you is that you simply could take a water-soluble marker or a friction pen or something like that and just draw your lines beforehand using the orange pop ruler, and then, toss that aside and then use a regular ruler to cut on those lines. So whatever feels more comfortable for you is what I would suggest here. But I'm going to go ahead and insert that into the extended channel, and I'm just being very slow and careful as I cut through the left-hand side. I'm going to use my rotating mat to my advantage here so I don't have to shift any of the block around or the ruler. And again, place that very carefully in there and very slowly and steadily, I'm cutting that right side. Now, let's take a look at the instructions once more. And it tells us now that we're going to cut the top and bottom edges of the block using the outer edges of the ruler shown in red. So we're going to keep the ruler where it's at, but this time we're going to trim right along the outside bottom edge and the outside top edge. Again, if you feel more comfortable just drawing the line, you definitely could do that here. And then you would trim afterwards. I'm going to just move this over very carefully so that I have enough space to cut. And trim away. And then I'm going to just, again, move this ever so carefully. If it gets off a little, it's no big deal because I can reposition this ruler. If it kind of shifts while I'm moving, which it did. So I'm just going to make sure that my edges are aligned here, here, and along the bottom. Okay, perfect. And I'm going to cut along the top. Wow, there we have it, my friends. Let's go ahead and, oops, not quite yet. There's one more step I almost forgot, and that is we need to take our ruler and just extend that cut all the way to the very end on all of the edges. Now we're done. And remember, the finished size of this was 8.5 by 12.5 inches. So we certainly could take out our measuring device here. I'm a little bit larger. Oh, nope. Nope, we're good. 8.5. I was looking at that wrong. And let's see where we're at here. The 12 and then 12.5. Perfect. So this one is ready to rock and roll. Well, kind of. I have a little bit of beautifying to do on here. What I do need to do is remove the basting stitches all along here, remove the basting stitches up here as well. And then I would like my leaves to have a three-dimensional look. So I am going to trim those as well on those outside basting edges. So this vase is now complete. And, you know, again, I'm going to do a little bit of beautifying, like I said, and get this really ready to go. But this block, this giant block, was made with 2 5x7 hoops. So a little more labor intensive than some of our other blocks, but again, the results are absolutely stunning. So enjoy making it, have fun. I can't wait to change out the flowers that go with each season. This is going to be a pretty fun one. Okay, so with that, the next video is about ready to go, and that is how do we piece with our embroidery machine. I can't wait to share with you all about it. Okay, we'll see you next time.